Welcome to the Steve and Cimino Says Boom podcast, issue number 18. This could be a sad boom, right, Steve?
Boom.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the Steve and Cimino Says Boom podcast, issue 18. We got Otto doing the technical support from the grotto. Otto, what do people need to do?
People need to realize that they need to comment on these videos. This is comic book history, you guys. Like all of our videos. Please share them to your friends so they know what's going on. Subscribe to the channel and hit those reminders so you know when these videos are coming up. And more importantly, on behalf of these two gentlemen and myself, thank you very much for watching. All right.
All right, well, let me just do a little backstory of today's episode. We were going to do a Steve Spectacular showcase, but we decided to push that back because, as a lot of people know that follow the comic industry, and it was on Yahoo News, and it really got a lot of traction. Steve, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about the very unfortunate passing of legend, and I do mean legend, Mr. Neal Adams. Someone that both me and John knew and we had spoken to many times. And, he was just like a fixture. And, with his passing, it just seems very appropriate that we spend some time and let's talk about Neal's impact and what he means to us.
Yeah, what's funny is years and years ago, I when I used to do the Hero Envy stuff with Keith Gleason, we used to do interviews at cons. We used to go around and do cons, and one of our first interviews we ever did was with Neal Adams. And I always tried to go on a side thing. I didn't want to talk about the thing that everybody talks about, this issue, that issue. I used to talk about what he used to eat and stuff. And here's a little treat that Neal told me that that he used to like to eat. That when the wife wasn't looking and all that, he used to like to have frosted flakes and put a little bit of soft butter on the flake, and he used to like to eat that. That was something he did behind when his wife wasn't looking. That was a that was a food treat. I'll never forget that because I thought it was pretty interesting. And so, yes, that was Neal. He was one of our first interviews, and I know in a lot of times he can be hot and cold at the conventions and stuff, but he was really nice that day, and he was very welcoming. And he was happy to see us, and we were just nobodies in there, and it was a treat because he was a real legend of the field and stuff. So that was my first meeting of Neal. What about you?
Otto?
Oh, I was just.
Oh, I'm sorry, Otto. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I met him at a few cons. I was a fanboy back in action, and of course, I bought him the Batman 251 to have him sign. And I had heard a few stories, but he was pleasant and kind to me, and I really enjoyed meeting him. But the following year, when I met him in 2017, I had him sign this book, which I think we'll talk about.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I also met Roy that day too. So not only did I have Neal sign it, but I had Roy sign it, and just one of my favorite covers, being an X-Men fanboy. And
Otto, was that when Roy signed your chest? You had the Luke Cage
yes,
shirt
that
on?
was when Roy signed many things, including my T-shirt, this book, and then I brought it over to Neal to have Neal sign it. So, great book. It's a great book to have. Fun to have.
Otto, do you want to know something interesting? Another thing interesting about that day? A day before the convention, I get this phone call. It's Neal Adams' wife.
Yeah.
She calls me up, and I'm like, well, that was strange. She got my number from somebody else, and she heard that, like, I'm a guy that kind of make things happen, So she actually called me, and she said that if I knew anybody, well, she wanted me, but I couldn't. Obviously, I was with Roy. But she asked me if I knew anybody that could help help work the booth for Neal, for her and Neal, because I guess maybe their sons weren't there on it was a Saturday at that convention. And I did have somebody, so I called. And if anybody out there has watched the Slugfest documentary and has read the book Slugfest, my good buddy Reed Tucker, I call him up and I'm like, hey Reed, he was coming down, and I said, you want to work with Neal? And he's like, hell yeah! And so he went, and I told her I got somebody, and so he worked the day, and he was texting me the whole time. So he was saying such hilarious things, but one thing he's like, they've both fallen asleep. He's like, I don't know if I can sell this stuff without. It was just like great. It was awesome. But I got a picture of them together, shaking hands, and I guess at the end he didn't want any money, but Neal gave him a bunch of prints and stuff. So that was interesting. On the first time you met him, that was the first time I got a call from his wife.
Yeah.
So it was interesting.
It was really interesting, and I'd met him 1 or 2 times after that, and he was always very pleasant and polite, and as professional as could be from a fanboy standpoint. So I really enjoyed meeting him, and I regret not being able to meet him again. That's unfortunate. So that being said, I'll move on.
Yeah. So Steve, I saw that you posted a little soliloquy, we might say. Why don't you reiterate some of that stuff here, because that was very touching, and that's what kind of got me thinking of this episode for you to talk about, because you said some wonderful stuff. I think people should hear that from here.
Yeah, I as I said, it was just very odd how I was going through a collection of Batman, and they were the issues in the 200s. And all of a sudden, one of my fellow employees pokes his head through the door and says, Neal Adams just passed. And I had been having a good day. I was grading. I was happy. I was grading this classic material. And I just put the book down for a second, and I began to contemplate what we had just lost. And I began to think, I think everyone, including all the dealers and people who organize shows, began to take Neal for granted. I think in many ways it was like, well, Neal's going to be there. He's going to be there. He's going to be signing Hunter's books. Neal. He's going to be every single show this year. Neal. But as I sat there thinking, I was like, wow, Neal's voice, Neal's presence has gone away from us. And I began to think about the sheer impact that he had made on this industry, how his talents and skills had reached out beyond the art, but also into the corporate structures of companies, the way artists were going to be handled and treated. And, for me, I in a rather selfish manner, I was like, oh, I wish I'd, said more when I saw him the last time I spoke to him. And it made me think about, this has happened a couple of times in the last couple of years. And I think as we are getting older, we are beginning to realize how precious life is. When you're talking with someone, when you're dealing with someone, you take it for granted. It's going to be here the next day. Boom. Hey, how you doing? La, la, la. Hey, what are you doing? How you doing? You never know. It could be their last day. It could be their last day on this earth. And so for me, the main thrust of my little post that I put up was, if you admire someone, if you want to speak to someone, if you want to give someone credit, don't hold it in. Tell them. Let them know. If you love someone, say it to them, okay? And, I was very fortunate with Neal. I got to tell him everything I wanted to say. I spent a beautiful lunchtime with him. Of course, anyone knows when I'm speaking with an artist, I tend to tell them everything that they think they know. And I was like, let me tell you about your life. And he was
Don't we all?
Yes. And he was like, wow, okay. And, his wife, had a big chuckle on her face as I was explaining the grandeur and the majesty, and he's like, well, thank you so much, and I got to tell him what Neal meant to me, what I think that he meant to the industry, and so for me, I did have to post something, and I was down for a whole day. I had, I was going to do a claim sale later on in the day. I had to drag myself up, and the only way that I could do it was by telling myself, he lived until he was 80 years old. He had a full life. He did not pass away at 59.
Right.
He lived until he was 80, and he was working, and he was vibrant. He did some stuff for DC recently. He was still acknowledged, and I think when he passed, I think he must have been satisfied or happy with what he had done in his life at 80 years old. That's the only way I was able to bring myself up for the sale, to think about that, because no matter what anyone says, 80 is a good innings, as we say in England.
Yeah.
It's a little cricket reference for anyone who wants to know what that is. It's a good innings. So yes, he's passed, but he lived until he was 80. He was vibrant. His amount of work that he left behind will live forever. And again, I think we can talk about, in some aspects, his work today and what it means to the comic world, not only back then, but forever.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. It's like those images, even before I even knew who Neal Adams was, they were like, we grew up, we're like the same age. We're all like basically in the same age. We grew up. Do you remember how many times his image was on products, like from shirts? I'm talking about even when we were young.
Yeah.
With the boom, and from the boom of the superhero ever, like from 75 to 81. Like you saw Batman, you saw those things, you saw Superman, like you saw the shirts, you saw the toys, the backing cards, like that. It was all based off Neal Adams
the
stuff.
lunchboxes, the posters. I swear I had this as a giant sticker on my wall when I was a kid.
Oh
If it
yeah,
wasn't the image, it was from the other. It was that. I mean, that was iconic to me.
So Neal lives on. It's like a good song. Even when the performers have long passed, that song brings you back. So when you see Neal Adams' art, which is going to be still around, still vibrant as ever, his art will never die. That's what we will I will take, and then that's the happiness, because Neal gave me that. He gave me those memories of being during an innocent time and just enjoying this stuff without all the pressures of life. And I remember, like, I remember those. Do you guys remember those weird toys? There was those rack toys, and it had this ball. It was on a metal thing, and then you would move it like this, and it would spin, and then it would get faster and faster. Anyways, it was a cheap rack toy, but they used to have a bunch of superheroes like that. They just throw a superhero sticker on it, and it's and the backing card. But I remember always looking for the Hulk ones. But I remember Neal Adams as Superman and Batman were on those too. Even his Wonder Woman was on that. And I remember it was just like, that's how I remember seeing him and stuff. So Neal was always there. He's always gonna be here for me. And I think that's a special thing. And if anybody knows out there that a few days ago, Roy wrote a little tribute to Neal, and it was in the Hollywood Reporter. It actually went everywhere, viral. But Roy states that in saying that how he's going to be here forever, like, because we love his art, and his art will always live on. And it was very touching. And another thing I want to talk about why I mentioned that was, a lot of people started contacting Roy, a lot of big people in the industry. They contacted Roy, and they were saying, like, they were talking about Neal, and they were saying to Roy, like, be careful, Roy. Don't, like, you're one of the last bastions. You please take care of yourself. I'm talking major people in this industry. And Roy showed me all this stuff, and I was thinking, like, I try not to take for granted, and I don't think I ever took Neal for granted. Whether I saw him at a show or you see him way in the distance in his big booth, it didn't matter, because I always loved his art. I always loved what he gave to me, and I'll always see that. So I did. I'm happy I got to do that with Neal. So whether I have to see him physically or I see his art, he's alive in me, and he's alive in the world that I see. So thanks for saying that, Steve, because it's sad. These guys are going to pass, and that's why I tell people really quickly, when you go to these, go Go see these legends now. The guys that changed the world, that gave us this happiness, that go see them because there's not many left. And they are human. We don't think they're human. They are human. Though they gave us an immortal or a sense of being bigger than we are, a sense of grandeur, they are and they're going to go. So go say, and even if you have to, look at them in the distance. If you don't have the money to pay for an autograph, look in the distance and be like, thank you. You can say it to yourself. I mean, why not, right?
Yes. I think we should take a moment to maybe explain to other fans that maybe not too maybe aware of just what Neal Adams did. Now, Neal was the original realistic style artist. Now, we had many artists before, very famous, but they weren't realistic in their drawing. They had a style to them, okay? Bob Kane, okay, very famous. It's cartoons. It's very cartoony, okay? Even Jack Kirby, okay? It's very cartoony, okay? Now, Neal Adams, coming from the advertising world, where he had to draw ultra-realistic things, ultra-realistic, okay? So he comes into our industry, and for the first time, and I know Hal Forster was very good at drawing, but his drawings were very structured and very straight, very static, like statues. I understand that anyone who's really old knows that name, right?
I know Hal Forster. Oh yeah.
Yes. He's held up as a bastion of magnificence. But what Neal did was he brought a sense of realism that had never been done by anyone before. So his impact on the industry was earth-shaking because he proved for the first time that you can actually draw someone like a photograph from panel to panel, okay? It doesn't have to be cartoony, okay? So after a while, it became the Neal Adams style. There was a lot of Neal Adams clones out there, but everyone trying to up their game and say, wow, this drawing has to be perfect. I have to make my characters look real, my faces, everything. It has to be proportionate. It can't be this exploding, massive, super, perspective type drawings. This realism, okay, is what separates Neal's art from almost anyone else. Now, everyone knows I'm the biggest John Buscema fan in the world. In the world. I don't care who you are. You come up and try and out John Buscema me, you're failing. Okay? You are failing. I will crush you. Okay? However, even I admit, when it comes to doing art that is photo perfect from panel to panel, I have to give it to Neal. Okay? So what that means is that Neal's art, if it was being released today, would still be considered magnificent and brilliant. People would still be looking at it. Let's just say that his first book was coming out last month. It came out last month with all the stuff that's going. I guarantee you people would say, wow, look at this new guy. Wow, look, he's better than this, he's better than that. His art, you cannot quantify it as, it's golden age art, silver age guy. You can't do that with Neal. His art transcends style and age. His art is perfection and brilliance. That means that when you release a trade paperback or a hardcover in 50 years, and some new person that's reading it for the first time that has no idea that Neal, has passed away, they'll be thinking, wow, this is just as good as today's guys. Who is this guy? I truly believe that. So I wanted to impart on this special episode, I wanted to impart on people the sheer impact. All the editors, Marvel and DC, at Marvel, they were like, oh my, who in the hell is this guy? Because as John said, he went through and designed all the new looks for the characters. He was on all the cups and the t-shirts. Over at Marvel, John Romita Sr. was doing that. But over at DC, Neal was doing it. He had the template of all the looks. He was doing all the covers. He was doing all the great stuff. And he was at the pinnacle. And everyone was chasing Neal. Now, the fact that Mr. Roy Thomas, got to work with Neal and John Buscema in one story is astounding. For those of you who don't know, run out right now, get your trade paperback or hardcover of the Kree Skrull War with the Avengers.
The first
Take a look at the magnificence when you have a writer supreme and artist supreme working together. Okay, so in one issue you had Neal, and the other issue you had John Buscema. It will never be that good again. And I know, John, I know you agree with me 100%.
Oh, and it's funny you said the writer and the artist. That why do you think these stories have lasted forever? Do you think the stories written today or 20 years ago are going to be forever? No. That's why Marvel makes its most money on their reprints of all the Silver and Bronze Age. Coincidence? I don't know. So I know. So you can't say that. So, like you said, I want to go back for a second. Otto, can you put up the picture? Kryptonite Nevermore. That Superman, which I think is considered the greatest Superman cover ever. Now, why this has a lot of meaning to me, in my opinion. When I was young and seeing these products, I did not know they were comics first, because you're a kid and you just see this. I'm 3, 4, 5 years old. But why this is so ingrained in my head is that when I was 3 years old, I had a Super Friends sheets. And on the pillowcase, they had the traditional Alex Toth, with all the people, and Wendy and Marvin and Wonder Dog and all that. I loved it. And I loved how Batman was the tallest. I just thought that was so cool. But on the actual sheets, this Superman image was what that showcased the Superman on it. And there was the Bob Kane and Batman, maybe the whatever, all the Julius, I'm sorry, I can't think, Carmen Infantino's Batman. There were all the other ones, but this was the image that is burned. I remember all the other ones, but this is the image that was burned into my skull. There was something about the chains being broke and something about Superman's chest up. That shows you how powerful Neal Adams really was, because as a young kid, inexperienced, and seeing all these other great artists on this bedsheet, this is the image that is burned into my skull. So years later, when I saw that cover, I was like, oh my God, that was a cover? That was an actual comic? I never really got many DC comics. I got this one. Why? Because it speaks to me, and it speaks my whole life. And then it's called Kryptonite Nevermore, even better. What a great title. It was just magic. It brings a little tear to my eye because I can see that those white sheets and those superheroes. Seriously, 3 years old, 4 years old, Neal Adams was in my head. I even knew Neal Adams before Jack Kirby. I knew him before, like I knew that picture. I don't remember Jack Kirby. I saw Jack Kirby when I saw those remember those the 1966 superhero cartoons, the ones that barely moved? Remember this? I saw those later, but that Neal Adams is the first impression I got into my head. Unbelievable. So I'll never forget that. So that's how much of an impact Neal Adams had on my life. And I did tell him, and I did say thank you, and he was very appreciative of it. It's those moments that you get to, as you know, when you thank Otto. You've done it too. When you said to Stan Lee, "I'm Otto," you just had to do it.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, some people out there do not understand why this industry is so beloved, and why, even despite such the horrible stuff going on today, we won't leave. We can't leave. We can't. I stopped collecting comics, but I never stopped my love of the industry. And Otto, I want to tell you something, and I'm going to thank you very much for this. Though I'm out of comics and I don't even care about that stuff anymore, when I first met you, and I used to tell Keith about this, and I even told Roy, and your enthusiasm is is very warranted. I mean, I got to tell you, I love that you still go into. You're like a big dope. I love you so much. No, you go into these conventions like a little kid. Like I used to
Yeah,
go into the toy aisle and look at all those superhero toys. You still have that. So I mean, you sometimes I vicariously live through you, and you don't remember this, but I'm going to tell you this right now. When the last time we did that show in Rhode Island,
yeah,
and remember I was with Roy and you were
yeah.
all the way down. I said to Roy after you had Roy sign those stuff, I said to Roy, I go, this is a good guy right here because he still loves the industry despite it all. You
Sure.
still go into that. You just want to be around it and hug it. So I thank you for that. And that represents Neal Adams to me because it's my childhood and I absolutely adore it. So
Yeah.
that's what I have to say about that.
I appreciate the kind words on that, but I don't know, to me, it's important. And, the more you did the back history and you start realizing what Neal Adams did and what he did for the artists and the writers, and especially Joel Shuster and Joe Simon, right? I mean, he helped these guys get the residual monies for Superman. Am I saying that properly? Like he fought the courts. Am I saying that right, guys?
Well, what
Yeah,
he did
yeah.
was he brought attention to it that Siegel and Schuster. I think there's a famous story. I don't know whether it's true, that someone went into the DC offices, and it was either Siegel or Schuster was making coffee, and someone was like, "Well, who's making coffee?" Well, that's one of the guys that created Superman making coffee. I don't know whether that's true, but it broke my heart when I read that. And I think the story goes is that, when the plannings for the movie from back in 77 were coming together, Neal Adams had enough cachet and a lot of power, and he was able to say, wait a minute, there's going to be a lot of people making millions and millions on this movie, and Siegel and Schuster are sitting there in their tiny little homes. No.
Yeah, no,
As a community, we have to step up and do something and correct a wrong. And Neal had the power and the intelligence and the connections to get it done. So now, Siegel and Schuster didn't get everything, of course, that they really deserved. Of course, fighting a huge, massive corporate conglomerate like that. But
when it was unheard of, Steve, when it was unheard of to do something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, it was like that was
at the
never
time,
done.
it was like, well, they signed their life away, they got to deal with it. And Neal's like, no, that's not going to happen. You needed someone with that tenacity, that sort of in-your-face attitude, and also with that reverence for the history and for the industry that he was in. He knows that he's standing on those guys' shoulders. Those guys, without those guys, we're not doing anything. We're not collecting anything.
Anything.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. God knows what we could be doing. We could be hammering rocks in the back garden. That was our entertainment. But no, we have this beautiful hobby.
Yeah. Right.
Steve,
really quick. You know how much that hobby was actually built on? I don't know if you guys noticed. You know how much Siegel and Schuster got for Superman? $150.
Oh.
So if it was kind of back in the and then just boom, and Neal was at the right position at that time too, because he was the superstar at that time. So yeah, look, I mean, it was such a vicious industry. Everybody was kind of fighting for themselves, but Neal came out there and he did it. And I know there was also a few others that don't get the limelight that were behind there too. But Neal was the superstar that was really making a name for himself doing that. And yeah, it just shows you his respect. And let's say another thing. What about his influences? Who was one of his students? Was friggin' Frank Miller. What do you think? That's one of his guys. That's one of his guys that came out of there. So I mean, you look at what his art and his teachings, because he was a good teacher before he passed. Remember, he was online. He was doing his little classes too. He was doing all that stuff, and he was going live and putting up that and showing and teaching people how to draw. He's been doing that forever. And see that despite Neal has a lot, there's a lot of criticism with Neal on a personal level with people. But if you look at that stuff, get rid of all his human flaws. We all got them. Hey, how many people think I'm an asshole, right? But if you go back though, I mean, he's still giving back. He's still doing that. And that's the beauty of what he was doing. So I mean, and he had the talent to do it. So good for him,
The
Good
funny
for
thing
him.
is that I have heard over the years that sometimes some people caught him in, maybe a certain mood or whatever it was. But I remember, years ago when he came to do a signing at Torpedo, and the word came down the pipeline, and I was like, wow, you mean Neal Adams is going to be coming to us? He's going to be sitting right there. It's going to be Neal Adams is coming. And we've had a lot of people doing signings, and 9 times out of 10, I don't even turn up. But when it was Neal Adams, I was running around to everyone saying, Neal Adams is coming. Neal Adams is coming. Neal Adams. And they're like, well, what's wrong with Steve? Is he okay? And I was like, oh, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here at 9:30 in the morning when he comes into the door. And they're like, Steve, you're never here. What are you doing? That was the power of Neal. And I had also seen Neal's work for many, many years. And it was a pipe dream. Like, well, one day, maybe I could meet Neal Adams, the guy that did it. Come on. When was that ever going to happen? I was in the right place at the right time. And, I was there when the back door of our Torpedo store opened, and in comes Neal. And I was just like, there's Neal Adams. Neal Adams is here. I can't believe it. And at first I was like, I don't want to swarm him. I don't want to be like, Neal, you're the best, because, I can be sort of overwhelming sometimes. And so I was like, hey, hi, Neal. I'm so glad you're here. We at Torpedo, we're very thankful. And he came in. He's like, oh, okay. And he went into the little employee area that we have, and I was like trying to control myself because I had like, and this, and what about that? What about this? What about that? And I was like, Steve, you're a full grown man. Let's just calm down. Okay. Calm, take a breath. Take a breath. So I was like, okay, let him sit, let him get calm, let him have his coffee. He got sort of relaxed, and I went outside to see the line, and I was like, guys, Neal is here. Like, you guys ready? I was going down the line. What do you got? What are you going to get signed? Are you kidding me? What are you doing? And they had never seen me acting like this before. They were like, did Steve take something today? I was like, I was on a high. So at the time, we were working with Zubair, and he said to me, he goes, Steve, he goes, do you mind taking, Neal, to lunch? I'm like, do I mind? Are you kidding me? So he jumps in my car, we're driving off, and Neal's telling me all this stuff, first-hand information about, when he's in the DC offices talking about, the editors and, how tough it was. I'm thinking, wow, I'm getting all this first-hand information from Neal Adams here. And I knew that it was a special time for me, something that I could have never imagined. And I was pinching myself. I'm in the car. I'm driving Neal Adams to lunch. We went to lunch. We had a great talk, and I got to tell him everything I wanted to do. I was like, Neal, let me explain to you about the difference between your art and others. And he was like, oh, really? And I'm like, no, you don't understand, Neal. When you did this line work here, let me explain what you're doing. And he took, because Neal loved to talk. And I think his wife was surprised that for the first time that, I trapped him there for 20 minutes. It was just a 20-minute diatribe. And I was like, this and then that, you did this. And on this panel, you noticed that you broke through the wall. His elbow is coming through the panel, and he's like, oh, let me tell you, the editor went nuts when I did that. I broke the panel, and everyone's like, you can't do that, la, la, la. So I got to do everything I wanted, to say everything I wanted. And I know, at the end of the day, he did, we shook hands, and he was like, he goes, wow, he goes, you got the strongest handshake I've ever felt in my life, you big galoot. And when he called me that, I was like, who uses those words? I had tears pouring down my face and said, big galoot. Was it Dick Tracy? We were laughing. So I had just have good memories. I never caught Neal maybe on a bad day. I saw him at 100 shows. I saw him loading pallets at 9 o'clock at night, getting his stuff ready, wrapping his stuff up. And I thought to myself, wow, look at this guy. He's 77 years old, and he's there, and he's loading his own pallet. You know, I was amazed how young he looked. He had a full set of hair. He did not look like he was that old. I was like, I don't know.
I agree with you on that.
I don't know what dark gods he was praying to, but they were giving him all this extra youth. And I was like, God's sakes, at 77, I'm not going to be loading pallets. I'm going to be doddering, even if I'm around, I'm going to be doddering around. I was always amazed at his energy, and he would be there. People would be coming up, you know. And how many times did he have to keep signing those Batmans, you know? And he was always very gracious. Someone would come up, oh, this is the best story ever. And, you know, and he's very gracious. Thank you very much.
What he told me about, Steve, you talking about the Batman. I just want to say really quick that he told me about why he loved to draw Batman was you were drawing two characters at once. You're drawing Batman and then you're drawing his cape. I thought that was really,
that's interesting.
Really cool how he said that. I was like, oh yeah, because if you always know is Batman's cape. Show that picture, Otto, again. The one,
yeah,
beautiful. Like, yeah, and he said you're drawing two characters at once, so it makes a lot of sense. Like that's timeless, man. And let's not forget, Neal came to Batman on a time when Batman was dead. It was remember that was after the '66 series, and then Batman was just floundering, and then you get the Batman of Denny O'Neil and friggin' Neal Adams, and it was just so different. And that's what everybody wanted, you know, that Dark Knight and stuff.
You know,
it's
funny.
Good.
It's sort of weird how we can use that sort of analogy to today. There's a lot of stuff going on in the MCU and over in the DC movies, which is leaving both companies basically destroyed in regards to ideas and talent, whatever it is. And that's just the way it was. That the Batman TV series had destroyed the Batman franchise, destroyed it, because suddenly it was like, well, I guess if those powerful Hollywood people are doing this, I guess us just menial little comic people, we can just, all we can do is follow, you know, what they're doing, because I mean, obviously they know what they're doing because they're Hollywood people. They took what they wanted. They made a joke out of everything. And it was up to, yes, Denny O'Neil and Neal using his realistic art and rendering, of course, to say, okay, you're not going to have Batman, you know, fighting someone from the intergalactic zoo. We're not going to have that, okay? You know, we're going to bring in some serious stuff. We're going to try and take on and do what Marvel's doing, okay? Marvel being very serious over there, okay? 1969, 1970, Marvel were doing some serious stuff, and DC was still lounging around in absolute ridiculousness. And their sales were being squashed, and all those people in suits and ties, you know, upstairs, you know, Julie Swartz and all those guys had to come down a little bit and loosen their tie a little bit and say, oh, what's wrong with our sales? Hollywood did that to the Batman, and that's what, you know, I don't want to get into another tangent, but we're having a lot of that today, and that's why, John, I know you don't go anywhere near any Marvel right now because they're copying everything that the, you know, the Hollywood people are doing and leaving it, you know, like a, you know, just like a trench. There's a trench now where, you know, you look in and go, what is that? Oh, that's the Marvel universe now. Okay. So I get hope that at some point we're going to get some people working at Marvel and DC, and they're going to say, okay, no. Let's return to some good stuff and get it done. You know, it happened in 1969, 1970. It can happen again, maybe, you know, but when you needed it, when DC needed it, they could call on Neal Adams. The same way with your Superman 233 cover. Superman had been in the toilet for years, and that's why they called it the new Amazing Superman. They tried their best to reinvigorate the title, and what better way? How are you going to reinvigorate a dead character, a character that was a mere husk? You're going to get your top guy to do a cover of the ages. I mean, can you imagine when that cover first got sent back to the DC offices? Okay, everyone's just like, oh God, Everything else is useless now. And they really did try to reinvigorate Superman by taking away some of those ridiculous, powers and stuff like that he had to suffer with. They did those little backup strips with Tales of Krypton. I don't know whether you guys know that.
No, yeah.
But they really tried. And if you're going to do something and refresh something, you get your top guy. And Neal was the top guy. So that's what, it means. At that time, it's like, okay, you can imagine they were having a meeting. And they're like, well, we have all these promos and this company's just come up with this idea for bed sheets. Can we get some drawings and stuff? Oh, well, you're going to have Neal. You're going to have this. You're going to have these visuals. Why? Because his visuals, okay, are the visuals that we expect. It's the 1970s. It's not the 1930s. And in the 1970s, we expect all of our characters to look just like Neal is drawing them. That is his impact forever.
And look at his Superman from Kurt Swan's. Like, you see Kurt Swan and then you see Neal's. It isn't even comparable. Like, it's just like bleh. And one more thing on that Superman picture, that Kryptonite Nevermore. Neal never liked that picture. He always thought he redid it because he always hated how he did the legs on there. Can you imagine that? Him seeing something wrong with it? He redid that because he didn't like the legs and stuff. I'm like, oh my God, when you see that's wrong, that thing is just so but it just shows you his eye for detail and stuff. But
yes.
It's just another. One more thing I want to say about Neal, talking to him, I had to ask him, is it Ra's al Ghul or is it Ra's al Ghul? Because it's Ra's. It's Ra's. He said it for me. He goes, it's Ra's. And so I was like, okay. So I never mispronounced it again. But it was good to know. But yeah, that is, he's a titan. He's a titan, and eventually they got to go to the Rainbow Bridge, and so it's sad, but we celebrate Neal through his art, and like I said, he'll always be here. He'll always be a titan, and he legit is one of the. A lot of people have titles. A lot of people have the greatest and the legend. He is a true legit, regardless what you think of him, he is a true legit legend that made an impact that so many other people had to follow. That's how you have to tell of a great artist. When Jack Kirby came along, everybody followed. Then Neal Adams came along, everybody followed, and so forth. Yeah, and if I go back to that X-Men cover, I don't know if Stan liked that cover because if I recall Roy telling me that he didn't like Stan didn't like that they grabbed the cover, but I think Roy kept it. I could be wrong on that, but there was some discrepancy there, and obviously,
well, in the original, John, which I saw, I think.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
In the original drawing that was released a couple of years ago, the original cover, the hands are actually cracking the
right
logo, right?
Yeah. Yes, and they said no, you can't do that. That's too confusing. Go back and clean it up. But so obviously they're a little bit in complaints about the hands covering some of the letters, whatever it was. But I think it was about 15 to 20 years ago that we actually got to see the original the original art where his hands were actually splintering and like concrete.
Yeah, and Otto, if you look at that, who took that? Who copied that with your beautiful
John
dark
Byrne. There we go, John Byrne. Yep.
Yeah, he took it straight from Neal, and I love the title. It fits Roy's title right there. What is the power? Even as a kid, it was like, what? I wanted to name a song after that. What is the power? And it fit the art so well. And another thing I want to just say with this X-Men, just what we were talking about before we started recording. I just want people to know how influential this X-Men title was. In 1969, Roy was voted best writer, Neal best artist, and Tom Palmer best inker on this. And this X-Men was best title of 1969. That's how impactful their little. How many issues did that go?
Yeah, it was issues 56 through 65.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
issue 66 is Salbasema.
Yeah.
And you said something interesting, Steve, about how if they didn't get the sales back so late, it was like 6 months later, they wouldn't have. They would have
Yes.
never.
I mean,
Oh.
obviously today we get, the companies get their sales reports, within a week. They're like, oh, okay, sales are up, settle down. But back in those days, they had to wait for all the stuff and the newsstands. And,
Do you
by
know
the
how?
time it was canceled, you can imagine it. Okay, we've just canceled the book. They had the returns. And they were
Right, the returns.
well, look how this book sold fantastic.
Yeah.
It sold fantastic. But as I mentioned earlier on, if it hadn't have been cancelled and carried on, we wouldn't have got maybe the new X-Men, and Otto's life would be miserable because he would be reading Doom Patrol instead of the X-Men.
Doom Patrol, Darkhawk maybe, who knows? Spawn, I don't know. Without my X-Men, who knows?
Yeah. So it's funny how things happen. The only good thing is, and I think John definitely alluded to this earlier on, that trade paperback, the X-Men with Roy, Neal, and Tom Palmer, must have sold millions of units over the years. It's always in print. It's out there. You know that Roy's getting a check right now for some of that work, and deservedly so, because no matter what paper they print it on, no matter how they do the recoloring, the genius shines through. That work holds up today.
Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, Otto, you got any last words here for
No, I just I want to say, to people watching this, cherish the memories that you had. If you had a chance to meet Neal, appreciate it for what it was. Know that his from a fanboy standpoint, his signatures were expensive, but you would definitely pay it now if you had to get them. So that's something that I took away with this. I really took away, the impact that he did, going back to the issue of Daredevil when we talked about Frank Miller and the Hulk and how that's relatable to this episode also, or this issue also. And just really, really cool. And just something that I always loved about him was the Muhammad Ali versus Superman.
Oh, man.
And how you could go back in that book and see all the people from that time, whether it was the Beatles or it was all the people. This story, I wish I could have talked to him about this, because in the crowd is iconic people from that era, which was incredible. John Travolta. I think the Bee Gees were in it.
Alfred E. Newman's in there too.
Alfred E. Newman, right? Just if you have that book, please go back. And I think on the inside, I don't own it actually. I've only a few friends of mine have had it, but on the inside part, there's an index of all the people who's in that audience, right? Yes. So appreciate that, because that's the sign that Sonny Bono is on the cover, right? I mean, if you guys know,
and
as you look very carefully, Otto, Deadpool is also in there, but they retconned him in.
Okay, I love it.
And I just want to, and I would like to say, I want to tell, I want to talk about the last time I saw Neal when I went to the premiere of Avengers Endgame. Oh, no, it's right before that. We'll go to that in a second, Otto. I'll talk about the last time I actually physically saw Neal. Me, Roy, and Dan, we went to the world premiere in New York of the Avengers Endgame, and all the celebrities, all the artists were there and everything. And Neal and Roy had some, they had some discrepancies. They've had some public fights and all that. You got two egos battling each other. But what was so cool about that is Roy went into the bathroom. I was waiting with Dan and Carla Conway, and we're just waiting. We're talking, and I'm looking, and then I see Neal Adams, and following Neal is Frank Miller. And Frank Miller waits there at the door while Neal makes a way into the bathroom. And I said to myself, oh my God, Roy's in there. Right when Neal opened the door, literally, they might have, you talk about fate. They probably hit the handle at the same time. Roy walks out, Neal walks in. They come right in front of each other. And then you see them look at each other. They both smiled. How you doing, Roy? How you doing, Neal? And they shook. And then I think even Frank lost more hair or something, or maybe his little his hat shook. But we all were like, it was like a moment in time. So it was great to see that. And the reason why I mentioned that is if you guys read the Hollywood Reporter tribute Roy wrote to Neal, he mentions that in there. And it was a way, despite it all, they still respected each other. And it was a great way for them to kind of end that. And then when we did a signing in December for Torpedo, was it? I think it was December. We did. Roy signed all those comics, but then they flew us to Orange County Torpedo, right? And Roy did a signing at that store for the first time. And then, Otto, could you put that up, please?
Yep. Right here.
Lo and behold, Neal Adams' son showed up, and I'm like, oh my god, he looks just like him. I was laughing, and he came to see Roy, and Roy said to him, "Why don't you call your father and tell him I said hi?" And so he calls his father and he said, "Hey, I'm seeing Roy. Tell him I said hi." It was just wonderful. So you talk about like how ironic, these guys can be battling for years and years and years, but they kind of made up in their own way. And then that was actually the last time, Roy said something about Neal and Neal said it back and his son said that. It was just a wonderful time. And I was so happy to get that picture because that was a moment in time. It's like we always say, you just never know. You never know when it's going to be over, So enjoy it and take it for what it is. So Neal and Roy will have that peace now, despite one moving on and one not. So it's very touching and all that. So that's it for me, guys. Steve, any last words?
I really love the fact that we got this platform to talk about Neal. It worked out. It was definitely, I had something else planned, but this is far more important today. And I just wanted to get my feelings across. And I think all of us have got our feelings across. And those of you who are watching our podcast for the first time, and maybe you may not be aware of Neal, okay, please Google his name, find out the work that he did, investigate it, because then you will find out that we are not being, hyperbolic. We are not overstating things. And, if someone else, who's a youngster can look at it and go, wow, I discovered Neal Adams today. That is what Neal would laugh at upstairs. He'd be laughing. He goes, oh, look at that little 12-year-old boy or girl laughing and loving my work. That would make him very happy because, he's definitely upstairs looking down, probably having a good laugh. He's probably up there, right next to John Buscema on the drawing table saying, okay, John, let me show you how it's done.
Right.
Okay. And John's like, oh, don't make me hit you, Neal. Okay. So
shirt and
that's
tie,
the way I think about it.
Yep. Shirt and tie and the royal blue shirt, right? The royal blue shirt is how I'm remembering him. And I'll tell you guys, and I will say this, not to, get real soft on it, but he didn't look 80. He was very vibrant. He was very, when I realized that he was 80, I was shocked that he was 80. So, but because he was timeless for me,
yes.
He was really timeless. So unbelievable. Great life. Thank you very much, Mr. Neal Adams.
So before we get out, we'll do a little moment of silence and Otto put up the picture and we'll one of the last pictures, we'll go a little moment in silence and for Mr. Neal Adams.
All right.
Boom.